Oh, the misery. Seed of the Triumvirate is my enemy. Every season the dungeon pool has 1 or 2 dungeons that are completely miserable. When you get that key in the vault or need it for score, a shiver runs down your spine. This season for me as a healer, it's Seed of the Triumvirate.
11 seat.
Oh.
Lucky you.
My enemy. At an equal key level, it just seems so much harder to heal than the others.
Frankly, that's a skill issue.
But I'm not letting Seed win this psychological battle. I like a challenge. I don't just prefer the other dungeons because they are easier, she lied. So let's step back onto the perpetual hamster wheel of self-improvement and break down why Seed sucks to heal and how you can prepare for it. Yes, I'm also talking to you, DPS with a root removal. Maybe after this deep dive, it'll be a fun challenge and not 20 to 30 minutes of sheer panic and tense muscles. What?
Oh.
We start the dungeon off with some of the hardest trash mobs of the whole season. You can double pull this middle pack with these 2 side packs with Bloodlust, or you can take it easy and only pull these middle dudes into one of the side packs. And hey, the one good thing about Seed is that the timer is very lenient, so you don't have to pull the whole dungeon into one death trap pull. But whatever you do, as the healer, don't get trigger happy topping off your tank's health at the very start of the dungeon. Don't ask me how I know that. The first area is riddled with some of the most annoying mobs in the entire dungeon pool, but no worries because we can make it easier on ourselves. A common theme this season is roots, snares and slows. In this first pack we got the Merciless Subjugator who applies a damage over time effect called Chains of Subjugation on everyone. The chains do a lot of damage, especially if you whoopsie daisy overlap the circles, but they also apply a slow. So, any slow, root or snare removal will also remove the debuff. For druids this means shapeshifting into another form. Night elves can shadow meld it. Shaman can use their Ghost Wolf with Thunderous Paws or Spirit Walk, Windrush Totem with the Jetstream talent for the whole group, and so on. Oh, and if you're a Retribution Paladin, you can freedom another player, and with Unbound Freedom, it will also apply to yourself. Isn't that fun? You should try it.
Your advice really hit home. Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
Once the Subjugator has cast the chains, it also puts a heal absorb on one player with Leeching Void. You need to heal this immediately because it also heals the Subjugator. And no one wants him to be alive long enough to do any more chains. Now if you see your tank roll away from these packs, and let's face it, there's an 85% chance they will be a Brewmaster Monk, you can start panicking because these champions put a bleed on your tank that when they leave melee range. Also, they can get a stacking and rage buff that does 50% extra damage. If you're watching your tank get void bashed away from these mobs in a later section in the dungeon, maybe use your Soothe as a Resto Druid or start your tank's funeral arrangements. And then your own, I guess. Finally, there's also a Dark Conjurer here. They shouldn't be a problem as long as you interrupt their summon Void Caller cast, because that Void Caller does a whole lot of group damage. It can also help to interrupt the Umbral Bolts they seem to be casting 24/7. I'm so glad they reduced the Bolt Slap and took away healer interrupt so we can finally focus on just healing. At least on a Shaman I can interrupt something every 30 seconds.
I'm doing my part.
Then we fight the first boss and there isn't much to say about him from a healing perspective. There's moderate damage when he does Oozing Slam, but that's usually about it. When he casts his slam, he summons 2 oozes that slowly move towards him. If they touch him, GG, go home, you're dead. You want to absolutely prevent this, so you need to keep them incapacitated or kill them. Because, oh yeah, this boss also does a Kirby move where he sucks in everything in the boss arena. In between these moves, the boss also casts Decimate where he jumps to a player, puts a puddle under them that hurts the player and speeds up the oozes. You obviously want to take this far away from the middle of the room or the oozes, but fun fact, if you use a movement ability like Gust of Wind before the boss lands, you can avoid the damage. Though I think I slightly mistimed it here. Well, that first boss was the easiest part of the dungeon. The area leading up to the second boss has magic debuffs, bleeds, constant taking damage from the Rift Wardens that you have to kill to spawn the boss, more of those champions on the tank now paired with a knockback mob, which makes the Relentless Pursuit bleed an inevitability unless you're playing with the Death's Advance using Death Knight. So many deadly ground effects, and my forever mortal enemy, this stupid tentacle. Look, maybe it's just me, but I can't seem to figure out which wiggle means I'm about to slam you into orbit and which one means, cool, you can walk past me, homie. Also, don't be like me and try to go around it on this side because you will be flying. Whatever, I'm gonna go this way around just to be safe.
We're breaking free.
This This area just has a lot of unavoidable damage with a lot of potential failure damage from all of the ground effects. The most important thing here is to dispel the debuffs and hard switch to players that get the backstab bleed from these ruthless Rift Stalkers, because that does so much damage, oh my god. Other than that, use your cooldowns to keep the group topped off from all the rot damage from the Wardens, and maybe try begging your tank not to pull in the adepts that knock them back. The second boss alternates between priority damage on one target that gets the bleed from the boss's pet Dark Fang, and group damage when the boss casts Overload. That is, if the mechanics are done correctly, but at higher levels not doing the mechanics will probably be a wipe anyway. The mechanics are easy enough, but it can be very difficult to pull off in pugs, especially when people don't know what to do. The boss's other pet, Shadewing, will occasionally jump to a player and start casting Dread Screech. If you don't interrupt this, the whole group will take damage and will be disoriented, which means someone will likely die from the Screech damage or not being healed through the bleed. The boss also drops bombs around the room that you need to destroy with an ability called Phase Dash, which puts circles on everyone. If you don't clear all the bombs before the boss casts Overload, you probably wipe. Easy on paper, hard to execute sometimes, especially when people panic and overlap their interrupts. Also, when we did this dungeon 2 days after patch 12.0.5, we had a bug here. I know, shocking, where my tank buddies' interrupts sometimes wouldn't hit the mob, which was interesting. But somehow the hardest part of the dungeon is yet to come. This is also what makes Seeds scary and challenging. It's wall-to-wall damage in there, and that's not even including any avoidable damage your pugs will take, but it also ramps up over time. Compare this, for instance, to Magister's Terrace, which feels pretty good to heal, then has this one hallway of death, and then it's fine until the very end, which compared to some trash in Seed, the biggest challenge on the last boss in Magister's Terrace seems to be staying awake. But anyway, back to Seed. Oh, my favorite part of the dungeon. These dire Voidbenders cost a massive buff on themselves called Abyssal Enhancement, which boosts their melee attacks and also does a truckload of damage to the whole group. Don't let this cast go off. They are commonly standing with their buddy, Void-Infused Destroyer, this absolute unit that puts eruption circles on players that damages them, puts a dot on them for even more damage, and then knocks them into the air. Please don't overlap circles here. Also, when he's done with that, he casts a frontal that is this awful bluish purple that almost perfectly blends with the environment, or even better, just clips through the ground. You know, last season we had a lot of very visible effects, and in this very pool we even have the clear eruption circles, but this frontal is just absolute beans. And it's not even because this is old content, because Nexus Point Zenith has an even worse offender. What is this frontal?
I'm legally blind, I can see, barely.
Anyway, the Destroyer frontal is lethal, by the way, so move. And then we get my favorite part, the involuntary yelps bit of the dungeon. Oh. And it's a bullet hell vampire survivor's nightmare. I like that Blizzard designs dungeons in a way where some trash before the boss do a version of boss mechanics. These Grand Shadow Weavers, for instance, apply the Void Infusion dot to a random player and summon these portal, gate, whatever things that summon orbs. You can tell by the lines which way the orbs will go, but these lines also rotate after one set of orbs, so good luck, buddy. The boss does this too, but more. Now 3 players get infused at the same time, while orbs seem to spawn from every centimeter of the boss arena. And don't think you can just position yourself well and set up shop, because the boss then spawns tentacles that constantly cast Mind Flay on everyone until they die. You or the tentacles. So if you're a melee DPS player, good luck. If you're healing this fight, this is probably where you want to use your cooldowns depending on how agile you and your team are. If you're at a key level where it's not lethal yet and you keep taking orbs to the face, then yes, because the mass void infusion also trucks, but maybe also no, because we've got more unavoidable damage coming. The boss casts repulse. Anyway, he pushes everyone away. He teleports to the middle of the area and you have to race back to him, because basically the rest of the room will become a giant death trap, and then he does a decent amount of damage to the group. You can raw dog heal through this on the key levels I've done so far, but when I'm playing my shaman, here's where I like to use my Spirit Link totem. Mostly because it's pretty hard to get good use out of it in the rest of the fight. If your group survives this boss, strap in, it's about to get worse. You've got about 30 seconds of walking and RP to lower your heart rate before you get the absolute hardest healer fight in the Mythic Plus season. Personally, I like the challenge, but I can imagine this fight will be super sweaty and stupid in higher keys. Basically, this purple chandelier Lura is singing a little ditty that spawns orbs around the room called Notes of Despair. They do damage when they appear, and then they start pulsing damage until they're silenced by these beams. which also hurt. And then she casts Disintegrate, which spawns revolving death beams around her. If you're one of those healers who needs to stand still to cast heals, good luck, buddy. Godspeed. The boss also casts Grim Chorus, where she moves the notes around, puts death circles on the active notes, and then adds a stacking debuff on the players for every note that's still up. So pray your group hits the notes on the first try, or that they kill her in one damage phase, because if this number stacks too high, no amount of healing will save you. The goal of the fight is to use the beams to silence all 6 notes, which then stuns the boss and starts the damage intermission. Yay, bloodlust, free damage, pray to the gods you kill her in this phase. Is Seed of the Triumvirate challenging and fun, or just too much? This dungeon has 0 chill, and depending how well you and the rest of the group are playing, it can spiral into an absolute nightmare that will send you on tilt. What happened to you? It can also be fine. Personally, I wanted to do this deep dive into the dungeon in my past runs, successful and less so, because I always feel underprepared for it. Like it always feels like it's a second from disaster. And as the key levels go up, this will likely get worse unless I know what to prepare for. And then maybe one day I'll think, ooh, Seat, now there's a fun challenge. Sometimes while playing with Pogs, you just want to chill. And Seed is not the dungeon for that. Speaking of which, if you want to see me struggle in real time, I'm going to start streaming here on YouTube and on Twitch at Sylphesh starting next week. Come join the struggle bus and watch me get super stressed when things go wrong in keys. Anyways, what's your least favorite or worst dungeon of the season, and what world do you play? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.